Good day, and thank you for joining us on this rainy afternoon. I'm Frank Goodyear, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's conversation with artist Lois Dodd and Bowdoin curator Joachim Homann. As many of you know, today is the first day of classes here on campus, an exciting time for all of us. And on this auspicious day, we are thrilled to open our new season of programs with a visit by one of the great painters of Maine and of the United States more generally. Before I introduce Lois and Joachim, I want to encourage you to pick up a copy of the museum's fall calendar. If you haven't already received it in the mail, there are copies available for you outside the auditorium. Our next program here in Kresge Auditorium is next Thursday when Elizabeth Siegel, a curator of photographs at the Art Institute of Chicago, will be here to discuss the work of Abe Morell and his connection to and influence on other contemporary photographers. Please note that the museum's Abe Morell exhibition, which has been a big hit this summer, remains on view until September 27th. Also, I want to thank those of you who have recently signed up or renewed your Bowdoin Museum membership. Being a member is a great way to support the museum and to learn more about upcoming exhibitions and programs. For those who are interested, there are membership forms outside. Now, to this afternoon's program, which is held in conjunction with the exhibition Night Vision, Nocturnes in American Art. It's a great pleasure to welcome back to Bowdoin Lois Dodd, an artist who lives in New York, but who has been coming to Maine for more than 60 years. When Joachim and the museum staff were first conceptualizing Night Vision, we talked about the idea of incorporating work from the more recent past, in part because we knew that Lois and other contemporary artists found the theme of night and darkness a particularly resonant subject. Ultimately, however, we decided to examine artists' responses to the night from the time of electricity's introduction in the mid-19th century to the dawn of the space age in the 1950s. That said, we're excited that Lois is willing to talk about the challenges of painting the night, a subject that she has explored on different occasions throughout her career. As a springboard for this afternoon's conversation, we want to start by showing a short video that the Portland Museum of Art developed in 2013. But most importantly, thank you again for being with us this afternoon, and a big thank you to Lois Dodd for ushering in the new academic year here at Bowdoin. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been coming to Maine now for, let me see, if it's from the early 50s, that's 60 years. Oh my God. Ah, all right. When I first came to Maine, to Lakewood with my friends, it was a rainy, cold June. I mean, we were all jammed into this old Chevrolet. There were 6 of us, I guess. I swear, we drove forever because then you had to drive through Boston. So it must have taken us 12 hours, I think. It was just awful. We were freezing and we were wet, but they were very happy. I thought, what are they talking about? What is this? It was just, it'd been nice and warm in New York, not hot. It was just pleasant June weather. So then, after a couple days of this miserable rain, the sun came out. It was one of those sharp, clear days. And then I said, okay, I get it. This light is exceptional. And while we were there, we had a little gallery in Lakewood, in this garage that Bill Cummings owned. He said you could use it. So we ran a little gallery, showed some art, and had other stuff too, little antiques and stuff like that on the side. It was fun. That was my introduction to Maine, yeah. Well, it's not like this everywhere. There's always been a culture of art in Maine. If you made a timeline of the Maine coast and started putting names on it, people that have painted in this or that or the other, you'd have an enormous list. It's always been an attraction. It's a good place to work. There's plenty that you want to look at. Maine has a kind of simplicity about the landscape. I've been in this place for a long time now. It's a barn that used to house a cow. It has to, I like to look at stuff, bring it in and put it up and look at it. So it has to have, all these beams are perfect for me. I think I'm more productive in Maine over this 5-month period because the distractions here are things in nature, right? The things you talk about, the things you notice are things in nature. And in the city, they're people things. So the things that you're more apt to get involved with here are usable for me as a painter. So that just feeds into what I want to do. And so you do get a lot done. It would be terrible if I couldn't do this every year. When then the whole rhythm of the year would be disturbed.
Did you ever think that you'd be coming back 60 years later?
Well, every year we kept coming back. First couple of years it was to Lakewood, and then Lincolnville, and then, I just never stopped.
Lois, welcome to Bowdoin. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a treat to talk to you about what it means to paint the night. As the curator of the Night Vision show, I have been looking at American artists' work of the century between 1860 and 1960. And I was often at a loss because there are so many conversations that are going on, so many perspectives on the night that artists develop that are very specific to the studios, to the studio practice, and to the experience of the night with an artist's sensibility. So I have always been looking forward to this moment of engaging you as an artist in a conversation about painting the night. The paintings in our exhibition will help us to guide a walk through your own work of the night. And I think that the benefit that we have of not conducting this conversation in the galleries, but here on the stage, is that we will be able to confront some works from the Night Vision exhibition with works that you have painted since the 1970s and that have developed perspectives on the urban night and especially on the night here in Maine. I would like to start our conversation drawing on the film that we just saw and ask you, let's see how this works. How can we move this forward? Thank you, Alan. The painting that you were working on in the studio while this interview was conducted in the film was this one, of a little flower pot. And I am wondering what you were seeing in it then, and how this relates to the draw that Maine is evoking for you, the draw that brings you back. So if you could just put yourself into the mind when you were filmed in the studio, we saw you painting right there, and you can tell us a little bit about what you're interested in this particular study.
Well, basically, it was about a circle and the connection with the circle, which a lot of dried, gone-by flowers have. So that's the immediate one, but if we carry it over into the night, then we see that what I'm doing this summer is involved with a lot of moons, which also are circles. And but that, then we ought to go back and talk about the night in other ways.
I have to find a way to...
I think the very first thing I ever did at night was when I was in high school. And I remember going downtown in Montclair, where I lived, and painting or drawing. It was probably drawing. I didn't have any oil paint. I was making a colored drawing of one of the buildings, the railroad station, of all things. So that was the first night thing that I ever did. And then nothing for years, I think, until Maine, where the night is superior in Maine because there's so few street lamps. And you see shapes in a simple, bold way that you can't see anywhere else. I mean, I'm in New York all winter, but I don't really go out and paint the night there. We were looking at Georgia O'Keeffe's painting of looking out the window uptown at night, which is terrific. And I've thought of it, and I've made dates with friends, and we've thought of it. We'll go out and we'll paint. We'll drive somewhere, we'll park, we'll paint. But of course, it never happens. So the thing is, here, you just open the door and go out, and you really have no excuse not to get out and do something. And you can make dates with your friends also, and go to places like quarries and paint at night when the moon's out. And that's always very exciting. Or walk down the road. That was another way that I would paint at night. Walk down the road with a little drawing pad and make little sketches along the way. And then from those, there was enough information to make the little step flashing things. So there were just a number of ways to approach the night in Maine, because it lends itself.
As we are comparing painting of the little flower pot that is so tiny and was right in front of you in the studio under close examination, and then you're looking at the moon, which is so far away and involves such a cosmic dimension. Does it matter to you, or is it just...
There's no difference.
How
To a painter, there's no difference. The moon is big, it's right there in your face. You don't think about the distance between there and there. It's all flat. So that's the gift of modern art, that it's flat. And so look at it flat, which you can do. You don't have to be concerned with what you're going to trip over getting there. You just kind of see it flat, and then you can paint it.
In fact, what we are doing with both of these small works is that the flower pot, which is cropped,
it's not really showing that.
See, it looks bigger than the moon, which is smaller
that's
in the
true.
painting.
Yeah.
So you're reversing the dimensions.
But it is bigger than the moon from where I'm standing. The moon is way over there, very small. Yeah. So, but the thing that got me started with the moon was I don't know, there was a year when we had an eclipse, one of the eclipse years. So I was watching it, thinking, gee, this is exciting. And then it occurred to me, I should be trying to make a record, so I got colored pencils and started making little drawings. And then I made step flashing paintings from that. And then I made the bigger paintings from those. So, but again, it's, you know, it's night, it's circles, it's pretty simplified. It's a good subject for that reason.
When I visited you in your studio just last week, you had this painting out that we are seeing in the back on the floor, which shows the moon in different times. And there is
that was the eclipse,
the eclipse in various phases.
Right.
That makes the transition very beautiful. And it's just funny that there is another little flower painting popping up right behind it, making the point that you were just making.
Yes.
So it was delightful. I loved seeing your palette waiting for you to paint. I was delighted to see your utensils and to see your studio set up. But of course, I'm also thrilled to learn more what it means for you to paint the night.
Right.
Many of us here in the audience, I gather, are painters and have a lot of experience. And you even brought some painter friends who are working with you.
How many painters are here? Put your hand up. Gee,
oh,
you're right.
That's the majority.
You're right. Okay. We're artists of some, so okay. Okay, then it's true. All right. So in the night, if you're painting, you need a very limited palette. You don't need a whole array of colors. So that you need black, you need white, you need dark, you need umber, you need dark blue. And probably you could get by with that, unless there's something out there that has some other color. But so that's, the thing is that you can't see well. But you can tell light from dark. When you have a palette with those things on it, you can see white and black are different. That's pretty clear, even in the dark. You can't see the difference between yellow and white, so you have to kind of memorize where you put those, or black and brown. And but you can memorize where you put those, and then you're all set to go with this limited palette, which you know, it's not too difficult. If you really want to be a wimp, you can carry a teeny flashlight, you know, and look at what you're doing once in a while. My friends John and Nancy, we go out together at night. That's another thing. I don't really go to strange places by myself at night. We were going into Rockland at night and setting up in parking lots, which was fine. The police would come and check and see what was going on every so often. They thought you were crazy. But it seemed like it was a good plan that we weren't just alone. I don't think I would have been able to concentrate without having my friends there to know that, okay, if something happens, you know, we're not totally alone. So it's kind of a communal activity, you know, although it looks, people see the paintings and they feel, it's so lonely at night in the dark and stuff. But that's the illusion of the person looking at it, not the person making it. So it's painting is deceptive. Let's put it that way. It's an art of deception, right? It's the trickster, you say. You're constantly fooling other people in a way. Yeah.
So you're carrying little boards, painter's boards with you,
Right, yeah.
that are already prepared for you to paint on.
Right.
And you
gessoed. Yeah.
try to work to the best of your ability at night without
Right.
being able to see
Right.
exactly what you're doing.
Yes.
And you're bringing those things home.
And then you take it back, you get up the next morning, and you rush and look at it, and you can remember, or this is very specific to me, I guess, I can remember enough in the morning so that if there are too many really holidays or whatever in the I can fix it then. But if much time goes by, I wouldn't want to work on it because I really can't remember, and it would just turn into something else. It would be a different painting. So, but I can retain a certain memory for a certain number of hours. Yeah.
You spoke of a painter in an earlier conversation who had not reduced the palette to just the necessary.
Right, that was Nancy. Yeah, she came out with a full array, and what she got was really quite sensational because you couldn't see the colors. So it was all, you know. I think that's another way to paint. You know, it's to be considered as a possibility. Yeah, yeah.
So the paintings of the night that you're bringing home are
Yeah.
incredibly varied, and maybe you just want to show us some of them to indicate
Yeah.
what they look like.
These are just 5 by 7 inches, in case you can't tell. Yeah, they're just little step flashings, which are aluminum flashings, which come already cut from the hardware store, the building supply place. And I find them very useful to paint on, because if you have an idea that you want to get down, or something that's fleeting, or whatever it is, it's not going to last too long, to do something small in a short amount of time, these are very appropriate and convenient. So I always keep a pile of gessoed aluminum siding panels for that. And these are all that. They're only very small. And then occasionally you see one, you think, okay, now I'll make it a larger version, but that's working inside and just copying yourself, so to speak.
Painting the moon is different from painting the sun.
Very different, yeah. There's no color to speak of at night. Yeah.
And the moon itself changes all the time.
Right.
I was amazed to find,
Yeah.
if you take the next one, to find, how do you call that? Scheme, representation of the various moon phases right above your
Yeah.
workspace.
I always wind up with a full moon somehow. Yeah, I was just thinking, yeah. Otherwise, you get an outhouse motif. So I think we want to avoid that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do have one there, and there is always, because of all these connections with caricatures, there's always something funny about a little partial moon. Yeah.
You are such a wonderful composer of various images and formats. The compositions centered around the moon seem to be different from other works.
Well, the big decision is, where do you put this circle on this thing? It's like a major, after you've done that, that's kind of it. You're just
But then there's
filling
also
in after that. Yeah.
The moonlight is transforming the world, and it has a magical quality to it that makes you see familiar landscapes in a new way, and also unfamiliar landscapes or cityscapes become possibly more approachable. This is a painting, a tiny little painting that you had out in the studio for me, and that I found especially fascinating.
Right. When you're painting in a place that you're not that familiar with, it's like I was saying to you, I don't really know what that was. It was there. And in the daylight, this was Tropea in Italy, where there's a little island attached to the mainland. And it was wonderful. We were there for several days. So, but looking at it now, I have no idea what that was, but it was there. I vouch for it being there. And so one time in Louisiana, too, I went with a friend. She had a place on a bayou, and I decided to make a painting, and we arrived at night. So I did this painting, and there were all these lights. And so I made a night painting with all these kind of lights lined up, and I had no idea what I was really looking at till the next day. And somebody's boat was pulled up in the bayou, and it was this little boat that had all these little lights on it. So but it doesn't matter what it is to paint it. You know, it doesn't really matter. Content is content, but it's not part of the painting problem. So
we have selected a few works from the Night Vision show to provide us with key ideas and perspectives. And one of they are not organized here in chronological order, but I thought it would be fun to take us all on a stroll through the Night Vision exhibition and see how you respond to some of the works on view. Here are two, a very small painting by Albert Bierstadt of a cloud study in moonlight, and the large painting of the burning ship that we just looked at a moment ago.
Right. So I kind of look at it from my own personal, what can I learn from Bierstadt with this one? You know, when you're painting the moon, the clouds at night are interesting, and they're hard to paint. So I'm looking at Bierstadt thinking, oh, okay, what exactly is he, how is he doing this? And it's a beautiful painting, and I'm looking at it as a resource for how to do things as well. And the other one is such a heroic, amazing painting. Again, it's full of things that it's just amazing because I keep dividing it in half. Like I see these two, the painting on the right and the painting on the left. The two, peace and war or whatever. And as you say, it was done at the time shortly after the Civil War, so I guess it had meaning, those kind of meanings as well, yeah. Hopefully we were moving that way, yeah. But, yeah, who knows, yeah. But it's, so that one.
I thought it was interesting to present you this particular work because the burning ship, of course, is a very dramatic source of light.
Right.
We have a lot of moonlit scenes, and you painted a lot of moonlit scenes, but the burning flames at night are especially dramatic.
Right.
How was it for you to paint the burning house?
Well, that was again something that took place in Cushing, and I was alerted to it by John and Nancy. And they said they're burning down a house nearby. The fire department is burning down the house. The homeowner would like to put a new building there. So he got the volunteer firemen to come, and they're practicing on the house. So it's very dramatic. So I went down and made some drawings, and John had made photographs, which when it came time to make the paintings, I referred to the drawings and the photographs. It's one of the few cases where photographs have really been a tremendous help. But so this is a larger version of one of them, and it was fun to try to paint all the smoke and fire and stuff, because it's kind of pure invention at that point, trying to make it look like smoke and fire. So I think it was a series of 6 paintings, but this one is the most exciting of the group. The others were all horizontal too, which kind of changes the feeling. The vertical one is more kind of alarming and exciting. But what's also interesting about it was that first I did them in little step flashings and showed them at the Coldbeck Gallery, where people came up and were very sad and upset and, you know, saying, "I'm so sorry." And I had to explain that it wasn't my house. And it wasn't a problem because the person burning it was trying to get rid of the house. So what you paint and what people see is totally different than what you're doing, in a sense. So that's always interesting. The reaction that you get is somehow... I mean, I didn't paint it thinking I'm going to terrorize people, you know? So it's just that it was a very exciting image. I mean, you hear about people rushing to pyromaniacs, right? So I don't think I'm a pyromaniac, but this was really an exciting kind of scene.
It's very interesting that you mentioned the flames interested you because you had to paint pure invention.
Right, yeah.
But you always insist that you have to observe in order to paint.
Right, yeah.
Well,
I don't know whether I found some references somewhere or whether I just was totally making it up, you know. I mean, I had the photographs, but they, yeah, got kind of big. No, it turns into an invention. You just hope that you're going to make it look plausible. Yeah, so, which is iffy. Yeah, very iffy.
I would love to talk about the house as an object of your attention. And one of the works in our exhibition across the quad is Alt's Old House, New Moon, that might connect to some of your works that we will be showing.
This kind of a house would be too complicated for me to deal with. I know other people involved with architecture and do very wonderful, complex things, but I seem to veer toward the kind of house that you drew when you were in primary school. Just a triangle and just a kind of rectangle, and that's about it.
When you painted your own house, you reduced it pretty much to...
Yeah, it's pretty reduced. Yeah.
I think your house is actually more complicated
right. I
than
don't want
what
to
you
get
show.
involved with the architecture, I guess, to any great degree, although I really admire and, you know, paintings that are of that subject, but it's not for me. I'd start getting involved with being correct, and pretty soon the whole point is lost. So the simpler, the more basic the kind of house it is, the better, the happier I am. Yeah.
Next one.
Well, that's the one that, yeah. So this is, again, my house. My house turned into a great subject for me. And at night, with just a house, there was a house light, and there might have been moonlight that night. That's always kind of interesting, the contrast between the kinds of light. There's the light in the house, in the window. Then there's the light on the outside door, which is kind of lighting the woodwork. And then maybe there's an overall moonlight. So I cannot remember whether this was, it probably was just the outdoor light and the window lights in the window.
What does it mean for you to leave the house at night so that you can look back at it from the dark?
The barn is right here. I'm not really, I'm just in the barn doorway or pretty close to it. Yeah, so it's not, it's like a space between two buildings.
And you're looking at your bedroom window.
I'm looking at, no, actually my bedroom is on the other side of the house. But that is a bedroom, and that has that room, the room on the bottom has the painted wall. The woods, I brought the woods inside the house by painting them on the walls of that room with the yellow curtain. So that room, you know.
You seem to be going back and forth between inside and outside. It's fascinating to see your beautiful room with the painted woods, but you are also going outside yourself to paint your house. So you're constantly looking at this threshold that the wall provides from
Right.
different sides.
But that kind of came out of a series of progression over years, because there were a number of summers when I went across the road into the woods and painted the woods. And then that lasted for 3 or 4 summers. And then I went into the woods the next summer, and there was absolutely nothing to paint. It was like, that was a surreal experience. It was like the woods then said, that's it, that's all you're getting out of us, we're finished, nothing. I just couldn't see a thing in there to paint. It just became a woods that you'd hike through or something again. So then I had to fix that room. It needed work. The wallpaper fell off. So I thought, all right, I'll paint the woods on the walls. So that was fun. Kind of fixed up that room, yeah. But anyway, it was, it's like I was painting the woods for a number of summers. It didn't occur to me to paint them on the wall till I was through with all that. And I had been painting the windows, even that window. I guess that came after the woods were on the wall, yeah. So it's like these things seem to be building on one another over years in some way that it's not planned, but I suddenly see something that's exciting, It's not planned. So.
Another element of your decoration in the same room that I saw was that you brought a painting of New York City to Maine, which was a very interesting observation to me. There's a little New York City scene right above a sofa right there, and the way that you're connecting
the loft, yeah,
your two
right. Yeah.
Residences is fascinating to me. It seems that you haven't painted the night quite as much.
That wasn't really New York City. That was just a couple pieces of furniture and a mirror. The mirror was in it, right? Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about painting in New York City and the paintings by Georgia O'Keeffe that are in our exhibition.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that painting is such an inspiration that she did in New York. You think, okay, I'll go out and, but I've got as far as painting out my window. There's a cemetery out my window with no stones in it, and the men's shelter is on one side. So that used to be used, and it was all lit up at night, so that was something to paint, which I liked. But, and I used to paint the view out that window, but mostly in the daytime, at different seasons of year and so forth. That went on one year. But one time I did go out in 2nd Street and paint, and the front of the building that I live in. But, and it always seems like a great idea, but I must say I've just never managed to do it. It's just, it's technically, and all the preparations and all the stuff, it's not going to happen. And you talk about it with other friends, we'll do this, we'll make it, but it's too complex. Not what you're looking at, but the getting yourself organized to do it is what's too complex.
When we're showing these two paintings side by side, it's always fascinating to me to think about the differences between paintings that represent something and paintings that are abstract and that are offering you to be absorbed. Abstract paintings that are, like Georgia O'Keeffe's Black Abstraction, really suck you in. You are a painter who observes the world and who is shying away from abstraction, as you always say. But how do you relate to a painting like that?
I love it. I mean, just abstraction in general, I really appreciate and enjoy. I mean, all the painters that were important in my youth, so to speak, were abstract painters. So they were the exciting, strong painters at the time. So I think that those were the people that I was looking at, or that most people were looking at. And so I was always felt like I was stuck between, because there were the very representational painters also in New York, and they were definitely two different groups of people. And I often felt like I was somehow stuck in the middle. But it was the abstract ones that I was closer to. So, in what I was influenced by, yeah.
I thought it was very witty to pull out your renderings of about the only rendering of the New York City night sky on the left side in a small painting.
Yeah, right. That was from my roof, and yeah, there's a good view of uptown off the side of the roof, kind of. But yeah, and that was the only one I ever did. That's 1982. But this one was in the middle of the cold winter here in Cushing. And I'd come up on a school break to stay at the house. My friend Leslie was in the house, and it was all warm and heated, and she was cooking, and it was great. So I'd come on the school breaks, and this particular night I went out to look, and there was that circle around the moon. How many people here have seen that circle around the moon? Because you didn't, I'm not sure you believe me. See, it exists, it happens, it's amazing. It was a completely still night, the smoke was going out of the chimney straight up, and it was such a startling and wonderful thing. So I did some little ones, and then I made a bigger one, and that's the bigger one, yeah. But
how about the night sky, your affection for the night sky as it possibly plays with your imagination? Everyone sees things in the cloud. I'm integrating into this slide a work by Dove, and that might have been similar to things you were interested in at a time. Is the night vision that you are familiar with as an artist something visual, or is it also a vision in terms of a spark of the imagination and something that your brain makes up as you're going out into the night?
It's some startling thing that you actually see with me. You go out and there, it was doing that. The cloud was about to eat up the moon, it looked like. And I'm sure 5 minutes later it was totally changed, but if I made a quick drawing of it, I could use that. And this one, I can't remember exactly what I was looking at, but I see a light over there, so yeah, I might have been looking across the field at the other little house. But it's, yeah, who knows what it is. But to me, it's something that I saw, so yeah.
It's wonderful. And another question, or let's say another theme that is coming up in your work repeatedly is the window as a motif of your paintings. And one work in our exhibition that doesn't show a window but presents the view through a window into private quarters at night by John Sloan, 3 a.m. is one of one of the highlights of the show. I'm fascinated by it because something that is very private in this world of these two women in their apartment is presented in and shared in a painting that they, of course, weren't aware of. John Sloan was spying on them while he was sitting in his studio window, doing night vigils, as he called it, and he just realized that they were women with very irregular rhythms, coming back home late at night, getting up very early, the one just returning, the other one getting up. Your work with windows, it's a consistent theme of your work to integrate windows, and you are often addressing them as a boundary between inside and outside, public and private. If we could look at the next one. I really enjoyed the night sky loft with a window and a mirror, creating a very unsettling and also very personal rendering of the
Well, I
night.
think the first windows that I did, I was really thinking of Mondrian and the squares and the rectangles and how organized that would be. The window is a kind of an organizer. So, but then as you go, then you see more and more in a window. But so that's the men's shelter out the window. But I think I was more interested in the curves of the radiator and the curve of the mirror and the rectangle of that window, and then the fact that the chair has all that repetition of curves and straights and stuff. That's what what was interesting though, I got painting this view out of that particular window, and what I noticed was that the trees move. Not that they blow by the wind, but that they, from one day to the next, they're leaning at a different angle. Trees aren't always exactly the same. They are alive, and they, it's kind of, you'd paint it the next day and say, well, the tree is supposed to be here, because I used it as a kind of a delineator of the space, and it wasn't there anymore. So that's when I realized, oh, trees, they're alive. They don't have to be always in the same spot. But so I don't know. It's kind of formal, but it does include dark and light, night and day, night and inside, outside. Yeah.
There are certainly enough paintings that you created of this motif to make you wonder whether it also stands for something that has a personal significance, whether you are thinking about the window as a metaphor, perhaps.
Really? Not really. Yeah. This one was, this particular summer, 1975, I guess it was 70, or is it after that? At any rate, I was painting the windows from the outside. I discovered that windows are exciting if you're outside looking at them. So I kept racing all over Cushing, looking at windows from the outside. And then the next summer, we had an awful lot of rain. So I couldn't think of anything new to do. I'm still on, my head is still with the window. So I had to do it from the inside. I did several views looking out at night. Night seemed to be then more exciting because you get all kinds of wonderful reflections in the window and so forth. So that's when this one happened. But it didn't have, I like it that you would get all these kind of meanings out of it, but that doesn't have to concern me.
Let's take the next one.
Yeah, and like that one, I don't know what was going on in that wrecked building that I saw, and that one was, yeah. These are both, there's a federal park on the banks of the Delaware, and there are a lot of broken down buildings and leftover things from summer places that people used to have before it became a national park. So when you wander through there, you find interesting architectural remnants, and that's where these come from. So when I'm not in Maine, I'm painting outside in New Jersey frequently.
The dark is always very suggestive, mysterious, promising. I think that often black is used to really spark the imagination and perhaps to suggest stories that are not fully spelled out. I'm just wondering what story the Yellow Outhouse would be able to tell.
Yes, that is a good one, all right. Yeah. Well, this is, it obviously wasn't usable as an outhouse, or maybe it was, but yeah. But this one, I don't know what happened with that. Yeah, this is full of.
This is a painting that we would have loved to show our audiences. And I just thought that it could be fun to conclude our conversation about windows with this Edward Hopper, who is a painter you have looked at over the years.
Yeah. I'm admiring that curtain. And the fact that he could get a figure, the curtain, the whole thing in that is quite remarkable. Yeah, well, I mean, his are fraught with all kinds of psychological stuff, which I don't think mine are. So, yeah. And the fact of it bulging, it's kind of wonderful the way it bulges into your vision there. Yeah. That had to be a hard thing to figure out. No, really.
Well, I think it's fascinating that you immediately refer to the fact that your painting is very different and not psychologically fraught quite like that. And we will just believe you for a moment.
I mean, if it is, great. I'm happy that it's fraught with all kinds of but I'm not sure that I'm responsible for that.
What I really enjoyed was looking through your work and looking for figures that you might have painted at night.
Right. None. Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, people are kind of invisible at night, aren't they? Yeah. No, well, you give me something to think about. Trying, maybe. Yeah.
So when
I mean, I don't paint. Basically, I don't paint figures anyway. I had a horrible experience once trying to paint a nude model inside a studio. A friend of mine always painted the model, and she said, "Oh, come over and paint in my studio. I've got a model coming." So I came over there. I tell you, it was a horrible experience. Nothing. If you don't find what it is that you paint, you're back to square one where you think you can't do anything. You have no skill, you know nothing. Because it was like that, and this is, I'm doing painting that I like, but I went to that studio and looked at that model on that stand and tried it. It was just miserable. It's because it means nothing to me. A woman naked on a stand, I mean, what does that mean? It means nothing to me.
So what does it mean to paint a woman with an axe?
What does it mean, what?
What does it mean to paint a woman with an axe?
That's pretty good, yeah. Well, we have a model who's very inventive, and so what she does is very interesting, always. And you can look in, you can read all kinds of stuff into some of her poses, And so she had the axe. She likes the axe. She likes climbing trees. She's quite inventive. So we get all kinds of things with interesting possibilities. But I wouldn't have thought of myself of posing her with the axe. It was her idea to pick up this thing and, So again, it wasn't planned, but yeah.
Well, it's certainly you created a very impressive painting out of that moment, that poster. One of the paintings in our last gallery is Lee Krasner's Assault on the Solar Plexus, which is, when I'm thinking about Lee Krasner painting this and struggling with night thoughts, addressing all sorts of anxieties that might have come up overnight. I'm seeing her in front of her canvas, using the brush in the way the woman with the axe you painted uses her axe. asserting herself.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether a painting for you does have that cathartic.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that I get the desperation that she was feeling out of looking at her painting at all. So, I mean, what people see looking at other people's work can be totally unrelated to what their impulse was. And you know, it seems to be about rhythm and line and brush marks. I'm not too imaginative, I think. So I don't get psychological things out of it. I don't know.
Let's, I mean, you have used painting to tell us more about your understanding of yourself as an artist, and the two self-portraits with which we want to conclude do exemplify some sense of yourself as a painter.
Well, again, I was doing that year or the year before, I kept doing self-portraits. And a friend appeared with a top hat. So that made that probably the most interesting of all the ones that I was doing because of the hat. It was really fun to paint it. So it's not, it's not fraught with any, and this one is, again, I was painting outside. I might have been painting the view or something, but then I noticed this amazing clear kind of shadow on the ground. So I thought, ooh, that's really sharper and clearer than what I'm looking at in front of me, so maybe I should paint that. That's how it happened. It wasn't that I mean, then you look at it and think, gee, it's just, I'm disappearing, I'm turning into a shadow, you know. This is, and there's just a little bit of paint and I'm fading away. I don't know, you know, I don't know what it all means, but that summer I did a lot of shadows. So, and that was very exciting. Again, it was like, ooh, wow, what have I found, you know? But, yeah, when you stumble onto something, that's what I feel like I'm doing, is stumbling onto this imagery, and it gets very exciting for a period of time, and then it dries up and goes away, and you've got to find something else. Or something else happens that, in between, I just go back to the landscape and wait for the next event, whatever it might be. It feels like that, anyway, yeah.
I think it's a wonderful observation. I love these two paintings, and I think that they do suggest that there is more to the transformation of your observation into a work of art than just a, of course, literal translation. It's really your creativity and your vision are deeply embedded in there. And that might help us to understand in a more broader sense, the attraction that the night has, because it is a time where things are turning out to be very different than we are used to seeing them, where a transformation happens in front of your eyes that in some ways might be analog to a transformation of life as we see it into the reality of the work of art. That was my working assumption as I did this show. I thought that it would be fun to conclude this part of the conversation before we open up the conversation to the audience with the quote from a hyperallergic review of the Night Vision show that I find is applicable to your works. Natasha Seaman wrote, "The creation of Nocturnes may point the way towards modernism, but it also leads back to the notion of artists as magicians and tricksters, themselves elusive creatures of the night."
Okay, all right, that's
Can you
very
see
nice. I accept that.
There's so many painters here and so many people who might have questions for you, Lois. I think it would be great to invite you into the conversation. If you have questions or comments, if you want to tell us about your paintings or photographs or works of art that deal with the night, please go ahead. We have 2 microphones for the audience, and we will be very happy to assist you.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for giving us your time. I just have an observation. Curators and art historians are always looking for reasons. I loved your answers. That things come to you when it's ready, and sometimes that nothing comes to you, so you go back to your landscapes, and then all of a sudden something strikes you. It's as simple as that. What happens in your head when the curator, who made an incredible show next door, asks you why, and how important is this, and was it a real psychological meaning? I mean, it must start you thinking in different ways, or you're just going to go back to your wonderful little house in Cushing and paint what you see.
Was that a question? No, that was just that was not a question.
Only if you have an answer.
Yeah. You didn't have a question, did you?
Is it going to make, is it already begun a process of you thinking about your work differently? Because he keeps asking you why.
Well, that's his job. Yeah.
Your 2 jobs are so very different.
Yeah.
That's right.
Very.
I'm glad they are.
Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk about your decision to primarily work from life. It seems like when realist painting does get attention, which isn't often enough in my opinion, but when it does, the focus is often on the image and not about the practice behind it. And I was wondering if your decision to work primarily from life is more a philosophical consideration or a technical consideration, maybe some combination, but at any rate, just the process of working from life. I mean, the one on the right that's up right now definitely seems like that's a huge part of the meaning that I take from it, is that here I am actually witnessing this. Here's a shadow of my physical object that I inhabit. At any rate, working from life, your thoughts.
Wait a minute. So what does he want to know? I didn't.
Is it a philosophical consideration
You
that
just
leads?
have to be, I'm getting deaf.
Is your decision to work from life, did it stem from a philosophical consideration of I'm here, it's a
Yeah.
first-hand account, or was it I don't get enough visual information from photographs or other sorts of imagery?
Well, I'm definitely against using photographs. That seems immoral. I do have morality on my side. It's just the way it turned out to be for me, that I have to work from what I see. It's not any more than that. I mean, if I had the ability to work totally abstractly, that would have been great and exciting. But I just couldn't leave some kind of imagery that I have to see. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is for me. You know, it's not a philosophical decision. It's just
Well, if it's must be an ethical decision then.
well,
if
it
it's
is,
immoral
but
to work from
it's
photographs.
also the only way I can work.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems more basic even than philosophical.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
I was listening very closely when you listed the colors you brought out when you painted at night. You said
Right.
black, white, and then you said dark blue. but there isn't any tube of paint called dark blue.
There isn't any.
So my question is, what tubes of blue paint do you bring with you?
Oh, so ultramarine blue, raw umber, white, black. There are two blacks. There's more than one black. You can always mix up black as well. And I think some kind of yellow is useful to have. Where are you anyway? Who was that speaking?
Catherine. Kathy Bradford.
Oh, okay. Oh, Kathy, it's you. Okay. Yeah, well, we can discuss this another time.
Hi, Lois.
Yeah.
So I have a question that came to me in the middle of the night. I was thinking about coming to here, and it can be posed in many ways, and actually the curator raised it a number of times, as did a member or two of the audience. And it goes like this. How do you enter the night? And it's a question of perception and cognition. You know, how does one enter this night? How does one, how does that inform the vision? You know that I'm a fisherman and I go out at night to fish.
Right.
The audience doesn't know this. I fish with a fly rod in the dark. Crazy, but it works.
Right.
You go out with your instruments and you paint in the dark, and it works.
Right.
For me, there are two ways of entering the night, and I wonder if you see a parallel. If I drive to a place I'm going to fish in the daylight at dusk and go in,
Right.
the night opens in a very orderly way. Essentially, I take the known and extend that into the unknown. Okay? If, on the other hand, I get up at 1 o'clock in the morning and I drive to the same beach, I'm really driving through my dream space. And when I arrive at that place, it's entirely different. The waves have an entirely different emotion, motion, meaning. I know that most of your painting probably starts from a lighted place where the dusk into dark. But I'm wondering if that other one ever occurs, and if so, how that does alter what you might see or what people might say you might imagine there.
Yeah, well, what I've discovered is that most of the drama in the sky at night is between 9 and between 8, when it gets dark, and maybe 10:30. If there's some kind of interesting clouds, they're fairly early in the night, and then they tend to clear away at a certain hour. So all of mine are basically, 9, 10, something like that. Unless I want a perfectly clear sky, then later is better. But there are things that repeat. The sky has its moments too. Yeah, it's when you go out and look at it on a regular basis. Yeah, it like what you see. It's a regular. You can learn to kind of expect certain things at certain hours, and so that's always interesting.
Well, the hours before dawn also have that changeability, that mutability. Right, the hours right before dawn, there's a lot going on at that point,
Really, your
when
voice
the
is
light
too
seeps
soft.
into the night and reveals. But you've not done that then.
You have to shout at me. I can't make it out, Bill. Your voice is too soft.
Oh, I said that the in the ending of night, when dawn appears, it is also very mutable, very changeable, and very interesting.
Yeah.
And that doesn't. I guess you're saying that does not appear in what you've been doing.
That is changeable.
No, that you don't get up at 3 in the morning and.
Oh, I don't get up at 2. Yeah. No, I don't get up at 2 in the morning. Yeah, that might be a good idea. I should start setting the alarm for 2 in the morning. Yeah. And see what's out there. Yeah. No. It's just. Yeah. Right.
I was interested and a little disturbed almost by what you said about the immorality of working from photographs. My own experience is that I can't draw or paint fast enough on site.
Yeah.
So I take a bunch of photographs and take them home, and I do my best not to be a slave to any one of the photographs. I'll take photographs from various angles and perspectives and distances. But is that immoral of me to do that?
What's that question?
Working from photographs, why
Yeah.
is that immoral?
Oh, because it is. That's all. Clear.
Thank you for the clarification.
I mean, yeah, I have real deep philosophical reasons, yes. No, I mean, you know, what's the fun in that? Then you're just copying photographs. That's no fun. I want to see it with my own eyes. I don't want to be fiddling around with trying to. I mean, there are certain instances like this, you have to use photographs, and I mean, I'm sure there's certain painters that do certain things. But for me personally, this is not for everybody. The real joy in it is to go out there and sit in nature and look at it. It's a good excuse to be out there looking at it and seeing things that happen. So going out and snapping a picture is well, that would be the same if you were a really dedicated photographer. You'd be doing what I'm doing, but you're doing it differently, that's all. But, yeah.
Hi. Some of your paintings are very loose and painterly, and others are a little bit, the paint is more controlled. And I'm just asking a question about how you feel about the paint, like loose paint versus tighter paint, how you think about that. I just noticed that there are almost, not two kinds of paintings, but there were different degrees of loose paint or controlled paint in the paintings we saw, and some I've seen in
Okay, what
reality.
was she?
The finish of the painting, some of them are rough, others are very
right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
controlled.
Yeah.
Yeah, some are
Yeah,
very
right. Some are-
loose and
Yeah,
and
that's
others
true.
are very more, and I just wanted you to talk about that in any way you want.
Yeah, I've got bristle brushes, and they're always kind of rough. But I also now have some of those, what do we call them, finer hair, which is, the finish is much smoother. So when there's the small things, I really need the finer brushes for. But I do like bristle brushes, so anything bigger, I'm using bristle. But it always has that scribble. But I find that somehow I don't do well with smooth paint anyway. It's just I suppose so much of painting is about just touch and what you personally can tolerate. Certainly color is that way. You look at different painters' palettes and you realize that each person has their own tolerance for certain color, and that's what they're going to use. And the same goes for the quality of the brush strokes, too. I mean, you realize you can always identify people's work by their brush stroke, right? It's not just what they paint, but you can see their mark. And it's a given. You don't really have much choice, I think, about the way you do that. It's part of your physical something or other. Yeah.
I have a little anecdote about this painting on the right. I don't know if I ever told Lois this. It might be psychological. But when I first saw these, there were 2 or 3 in her barn, and I dreamt about them that night. Her shadow was there on the nice green grass, and along came the young guy that mows her lawn, and he mowed it right in front of her. And of course, the shadow image disappeared, and there stood Lois with this puzzled look on her face.
I couldn't hear what John was saying. Yeah.
The lawn was just mowed when you were painting, or just after you painted the
what?
work? Oh, he was
was
dreaming
just
of
a
a
dream.
lawnmower going through the painting.
Oh, the lawnmower. Yeah, which completely, yeah. Cut yeah. Right.
We have time for one more question.
Good.
Lois, Joachim, thank you so very much for a wonderful afternoon.
You're welcome.